Hey everyone, friends of Black Rock Forest, citizen scientists, teachers, researchers, visitors. I wanted to make a quick video for Bill and others who are interested in what we were doing with the drone up on Black Rock Forest this Sunday, this weekend, which is the 22nd of October. And it's a beautiful day, and what we were doing was flying this particular drone, and it is a very small drone, and it's completely computer controlled. And in the front of it, it has a sensor which has been mounted that it can actually measure what something that's called plant health or the normalized differential vegetation index or NDVI. And those are ways of looking at sort of the productivity in a particular field or allowing you to compare sort of the vegetation dynamics of one side adjacent to another. And there are many other things you can do with it. And a long time ago, Kevin Griffin said, if you look at the oak removal experiments from underneath the canopy, you learn a lot about what's been going on and the changes that have been occurring. But it's even more interesting, or would be additionally interesting, to fly above and see what's happening at the canopy level. Because sometimes it's a little hard to know if you're doing all of your measurements down at ground level. And they have a cherry picker, which allows them to get up into the canopy a bit. But if we could just fly over the top, that'd be great. And he was pointing out that there are drones these days which might be able to do that. That was some years ago, but I have to say I thought it would be a really nifty thing to do. And some years later, I wound up having a drone that had the capacity to do that, and thought we'd take it over and try it at Black Rock Forest. So that's a picture of the drone. And what it did is it flew this path. This is Reservoir Road, and the Science Center is down there. And if you look at what happened, we were standing on the road and then sent the drone off on its path. And it went down to the area where the oak removal experiment has been going on for many years. And it flew the drone in a zigzag path, carefully covering the entire area that we asked it to cover. And every time it moved a certain distance, it took a photograph. And then those photographs were recorded on a memory card inside the drone. And then it ran out of battery power, so it came back and said, could I have another battery? And I gave it another battery, and then it took off dutifully, and then it finally finished the cycle there. So Sarah and Martha and Francie and Bill and I had an interesting time flying the drone and seeing if we could successfully get a series of images. Things don't always work the way we want, but this time we were very fortunate in getting, I think, both of the flights that we took to work quite well. The results are, which I'll show you in this next slide here, a series of photos. You can see this is the series of photos that are the camera that takes ordinary pictures like you might with a regular camera or your phone. What the software does is try to stitch these together, as it's called. And it does so by using any information it has. And in this case, it has a lot of information about the GPS coordinates of where the cameras were, or where the camera was. So each one of these blue squares represents the computer estimating where it thinks the camera was and what its angle was. And the angle was mostly flat. Sometimes it was a little bit of an angle. And so you see a series of some 521 photographs. I'm going to turn off the little blue squares that represent the cameras. And then we can see that what it did is it said, at a low resolution sort of level, these points here, and they're just points, are actually points that adjacent photos have in common, sometimes called tie points. And it actually estimated a fair number of these points and then said, do you think it's doing a reasonably accurate job? And it looked to me like it was doing a fairly accurate job. So I then committed it to many hours of calculation to put together these 521 photos. So it takes a very long time. I have a fairly good computer, so you might imagine that it could take a very long time on a laptop or an ordinary computer. But if you take a look at the results, you get what's called a dense point cloud. And then the dense point cloud almost starts to look like the photograph itself, one giant photograph stitched together. And I think right away you can see where the oak removal plots are quite distinctly. we have the advantage that this late in the year, it took us a while before we got the drone and got it working and learned how to use it correctly, that we have the advantage of the autumn colors. To see some of the changes in the speciation. Some of the disadvantages, of course, is that some of the trees are not photosynthetically very active or have shed a lot of leaves already. And so it would be nice to do this again in the spring, maybe in the winter as well, but also in the mid and late summer too, so we can get a time series to see what the changes are in these different plots. So if you know the oak removal experiment, there's a series of plots where the oak trees were actually cut down, and there's another series of plots where the trees were not touched, they were the control plots. And in some cases, all of the oak trees were removed, sometimes the non-oaks were removed, and sometimes a fraction of the oaks were removed. Kevin and Bill and Matt Palmer have walked this area quite a bit and probably know exactly where they are when they're in the forest. I've been through it a few times, but for me, it's really handy to see from the sky what it is that we're looking at. These pictures were pieced together here to create what's called the orthomosaic. An orthomosaic is one giant photograph that can be analyzed by a variety of different software tools. I think you can see here are probably the dead oaks, kind of a spooky or maybe a sad picture of what our forest might look like in the future as the oaks, if the oaks were to disappear, as sudden oak death or oak wilt or perhaps some other disease or invasive species might hurt the oak trees, which are the dominant trees in these forests. Now I want to go back to the actual software that helped put this together, and this is called Drone Deploy. It's a software that's designed to fly drones that are programmable and to coordinate the pictures that it's taken. So again, we were over here, and then the drone flew all the way out here. We could not really see it, even with a spotting scope. It was very hard to see it because it was so small at that point. But we tried to maintain a constant eye contact with it, and it just zigged back and forth and took all these images. So here they are stitched together by this very same software. And again, you can see the same results as I was showing you with the other software. What's interesting, I think, and which is why I wanted to show you here, is that it can also do a three-dimensional reconstruction. You may recall that it's a series of points. Those points can be connected together and a surface model can be built of the forest. And this is what happens. I think it's sort of interesting to look at it because you get more of a sense of the actual sort of holes in the canopy where the oak trees have been removed. You can see the house now actually has a three-dimensional structure to it, and the trees which are casting shadows, we can now see why they're casting shadows. So it's sort of interesting to do that and to look inside, to look more closely inside. Of course, the camera only looks down, so it can't actually figure out what was underneath the canopy. So if you tilt it too much, it starts to look sort of strange. But still, I think there are some interesting perspectives to be had by looking at this. I think it's an amazing way to look at our forests. I think these new tools that are here are allowing us to look at our vegetation in ways we haven't done before. And I keep thinking how, this great experiment that has been going on for some years is allowing us to get a sense of what the ecological consequences are, not just for the forest at the canopy level, but also on the ground, what's happening below the canopy, what's happening to the animals, what's happening to the soil microorganisms, to anybody who's doing research in there, and for people to visit and get a sense of what their forests are looking like. I hope that in the research we're going to be doing in the near future, that we might actually be able to use these drones to go out and find individual trees which might be diseased, or areas where there might be spreading infection, and then go back and target them for some sort of treatment. Right now, you'd have to walk through the forest very carefully trying to see if you could find an infected tree, and this allows you to do it with some precision once you have the drone. So in terms of looking for trees that are infected by disease like oak wilt or sudden oak death, which I ever get here, or to look for trees which might be being attacked by some other pathogen or insect or parasite, that's really quite valuable. But even just to look at the forest changing over time, if we could do these regularly. One can do this with remote sensing, but not to the level of accuracy you can do with the drones. And you don't have to wait for a clear day. It doesn't matter if it's cloudy because we fly under the clouds, and we're required to fly under the clouds by law. As you can imagine, no more than 400 feet up. But to me, I keep thinking about how important the foundation species are, like the oaks, to a forest like this. And it would be amazing if we had footage like this of what the forest looked like when the elm trees were disappearing from Dutch elm disease, or the chestnuts were being hit by chestnut blight, and to get a sense of the change that's going on. My sense here is that right now, where the oaks have been removed, the maples, I'm guessing by the colors, are doing quite well. And so we may have the forest replaced by a different set of trees. Maybe its productivity and many of the ecosystem functions and services will be returned by other species. But my sense is that it's not as robust a forest, which is my area of research. Why does biodiversity matter to the robustness of our systems? But also, I think that everybody can appreciate that these sorts of changes mean a lot to us, not just from things like nutrient cycling or ecophysiology, respiration and photosynthesis, or biodiversity and biodiversity loss, but also just from the sense of aesthetics and cultural values that we place on these forests, which if you've been up this autumn, around this time is particularly spectacular when the diversity of the trees start to show up in their color. So thanks everyone. I hope this is instructive and useful, and I look forward to doing more of this work with, with better drones now that our preliminary results are looking quite promising. Thanks everyone.